Okay, so I'm back at it, picking up where I left off on the tailgate. I've got that trimmed where I want it pretty much. Both sides are fixed up where the latches are and everything. And I've gone ahead and I've trimmed the bottom. I'll show you all that. And I'm getting ready to preliminarily like rough in where the skin's got to go. And I'll show you the issues that I ran into, or I'm going to run into with that. Anyway, let me get you turned around and we'll go on and take a look at what I'm up to. So as you can see, I got the skin prepped. I trimmed off these edges, which, you know, now this is going to be inboard, so I needed to have this completely flat in order to trace a new line where this is going to go, and where it's got to get flanged over anew. And so what I have going on here is I've got this side welded up and ground off and flushed up with this tail light. So both sides are set like that. What I'm dealing with the issue right now is I want to try and taper this in as nice as possible, but my limitation my limitation is the pivot point here on the hinge. I'm right up against it, so I can't really grind too much more off in order to make this a sweet transition that's going to be 100% flat. So it's going to probably come from this point and cut in right here. That's probably what's going to have to happen there. At any rate, that's where I'm at with this. And like I said, I trimmed off this bottom flange over here already. There it is on the floor. I was going to try and, you know, manipulate it, but it was too much. So just trim it all off. And I'm going to have to attach another flange vertically for the skin to, you know, go around and hem on the bottom side. So, but what I need to do now is I need to see how this is going to look as far as how it tapers in, like I said, to both tail lights, and see if it looks, you know, too abrupt. If it does, I'll have to put on my thinking cap again and see what I'm going to do. I might have to move the pivot points on the hinge if that's even possible. We'll see. At any rate, that's what I'm getting ready to do right now. Well, that doesn't look too hideous, so it's not abrupt like I thought it was going to look. So I will proceed to figure out how I want to do this, these edges here, and then I'll have to take the whole thing off to weld that that inner lip on there that this bottom will have to flange over. At any rate, that's where it's at right now. Moving on. Someone commented they liked little helpful handy hints for whatever they're worth. I thought I'd show you this one again, which I've shown it on my other series builds a couple of times. And what I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to get mark this panel, which is now wider than this section, as to where I want to bend it in order to have it flange over to create an even seam down next to this tail light. Well, this works for any kind of seam you try to establish in this fashion, or if you're trying to do a neat overlay of a panel. Say you step a panel and then you want to put another panel in the step. This works for that too. Anyway, what I'm going to do here is first put a piece of tape right on the edge, and it's important to use the same roll of tape while you're doing this job, because tape rolls are cut not exactly accurate. So if you pick up another roll of tape and try to do what I'm about to do, it may make your cut inaccurate. In other words, if it's wider or narrower than the tape you started with, you'll have problems. So I'm going to cut you off, and I'll put you back on whenever I get this skin hung back on here to show you what I'm talking about. All right, so with the tail panel skin back on, you can see this yellow tape, the edge of the yellow tape just protruding out a little bit, just enough for me to see the edge. And I've went ahead and scrubbed the paint off, because eventually when I do mark it and want to bend it, I don't want to have any of this paint build up on it when I go to bend it, or else it'll cause an irregularity in the bend. So over here is an example of what I'm talking about. Now I went ahead and I took tape off the same exact roll, and I lined it up on that edge. So now I know the distance in from the edge here is the actual edge of the tail light. plus a 1/4 of an inch. If I want a 3/16 opening here, ideally what I need to do is add another 1/16 of an inch for the thickness of the metal when it's bent over at a 90 degree, and then eventually hemmed over. I might go even a little bit broader than that. So usually what I'll do is I'll just mark it with a felt tip marker, and I'll go to the other side of the marker. Just give me just a little bit more breathing room. Anyway, that's all there is to know about that, and I'll let you know how it all works out. One final piece of the puzzle that I forgot to mention was I have my line established now. I have to back up from that line a 1/2 inch. There's a 1/2 inch tape in order to know where I'm going to trim this panel to give me what I want. So lots of tape. Tape comes in handy. All right, for the flanging operation, I've cut it along this body line, obviously, because we wouldn't be able to flange that neatly. I made up a set of these pliers here. Let's see. You pretty much use any set of dikes you want. Naturally, I've lost my good ones, which are a lot larger. This one's just a regular pair of dikes. It has one side is ground off so that it has a sharper edge, and that'd be the part that you would put under here to bend against. Here's an old pair. I can just use this to illustrate what I was talking about till I find my good ones. Anyway, this was originally set up for a 1/4 inch. I just welded a little steel stop right here on there to bump up against, but then again I needed it for a 1/2 inch more than I needed it for 1/4 inch, so I just slotted it out a little bit more to go down a little deeper. That just helps you to maintain the depth to your line like that without having to look at it and line it up every time. It's just you run it into that stop, and it makes the whole idea of going down this thing by hand a whole lot easier. Like I said, I have a real nice set that's a lot larger, a big set of electricians, side cutters, and yeah, so I don't know where they're at. I don't know what I would have used them for, because they're no good as regular pliers for anything. They're around here somewhere. Anyways, that's what I'm up to. All right, so as a result of flanging it up, you can see that it straightened everything out. So I have to go back in with my shrinker and feed the edge in and shrink it over. I've got a pattern here of the shape that it wants to be. And even though this is going to get hemmed over flat again, so it'll stretch out once again once it's going around the lip, just to get it fit on there to make sure everything's nice, I have to shrink it to the shape that I've just straightened out by flanging it over, as you can see right there. Okay, so that's what it's looking like as far as it being back on the car. I'm not going to attach this to the car just yet. I have a lot of other projects that have to go on before I can close these two sections together. The main one right now will be Cleco in these side flanges so that it's all held together, taking the whole piece back off and adding a flange to the inner structure that will accept this bottom flange over here. So that's what I'll be up to next. Okay, with the skin Clecoed on there, sitting as natural as possible, developing the piece that I have to mend in there to give it something to crimp this bottom edge around. So I'm working on the center section between the hinges. I was going to do 2 halves, but I would have had to do a lot of cutting around the hinges that, you know, it's just not necessary. I just need something from that side of the hinge over and from the center here. And so what I've got here is it's got a slight curvature to it to match the skin, and it's going to fit up underneath here. It's a little bit of a pain to get it up in there. I'll put it up in there and I'll show you what it looks like. Can't see much, but I'll show you what it looks like after I get it up there. Well, I'm working kind of blind here as far as making sure that it's centered up. So what I did was, I don't know if you can see that here, as I traced the hole, there's already a hole in here for the wiring. I traced the hole out, and then I pushed it all the way to the one side so it's hitting the hinge on that side. And then I shoved it over and did it again. You can see I've got two circles drawn there. And I put a mark about the center, and that basically lines up my hole here. That puts me even between both of the hinges. So it's not a little trick there. If I wanted to do it, you know, without having a hole there, just drill a hole and do the same thing. Doesn't matter if it's dead on center. It'd be nice to have it dead on center, but make it large enough that, you know, it takes up the slop left, right, and then you got a center mark. Bring it back, and then I'll drill a cleco hole here and put it in, and we'll hold it up. All right, with the tailgate back open again, you can see I've got it clecoed both to the skin, and I've got it clecoed to this bottom panel here. So that's where we're set right now. And I've just got to develop these end pieces from here on over. So I'll do that with the tailgate open because it's just easier to do. I couldn't do it with this one because the skin wants to move away from the inner liner, so I had to secure it to the inner liner fast before I developed these two independent ends. At any rate, I'm just deciding whether or not I want to put it on the, probably put it on the inside after we're all done here. Anyway, that's where I'm at. All right, so I've transferred this from the bottom side to the top side with the skin off of the car. And so what I've got to do here now is I got to trim down the excess, drill it out so I can drill it out for plug welds. As you can see, I went ahead and I made the two ends while I had it still, the skin still on, and I put the tailgate down so I could put it in the right position, got it located, and then went ahead and filled in these sections in between here and the end piece around the hinge point. So now I've got to take it off, scrub off the paint on the inner tailgate, and go ahead and drill this out and paint it also with some weld-through primer, and then weld it on. All right, before I go any further with this, I'm waiting for some paint to dry. I just made up that other corner over there for the bottom of the roll pan. Anyway, what I've got to do here is this little latch mechanism here that opens. There's a handle on the other side that pulls on the two rods that disengages the mechanism that latches the tailgate. Is right dead center as you would expect it to be. But I'm planning to put a permanent tonneau cover on here that will be almost like a trunk lid in a way. So with that in mind, I have, this is the mechanism that came out of the Camino that it was used to latch the hatchback down. So that has to really locate where this is right now. So the question becomes, where do you locate that? Well, this is not really critical to be in the center because it's pulling on two rods, and hopefully one being longer than the other won't be a big problem if I shuffle this mechanism off to the side. But that does mean that I'll have to cut out this enclosure, move it over here, and then make up something else to accommodate this latch over here, which will go right where this is right now. And that way, when you drop the tonneau cover down, it'll latch onto that, and you'll be able to put a key in and pop it or release it with the electric trunk lid button that's inside the car on the dashboard. Anyway, so I've got this piece of trim that went on top. I'm actually going to incorporate this trim at least up to, as you can see, this slopes up, but you can see there's a line of departure right about here where this goes flat the rest of the way before this heads up the hill. So I'll be splitting the trim somewheres in this area right here, and it'll travel up and down with the lid so that I have an actual finished look on the outside, and it'll overlap this this rim over here. And then I've got to figure out what I'm going to use for a seal and work on these corners and where the water will get out if it gets into the groove and all that good stuff. So bottom line is I got this sitting up here right now just taped on there because I'm trying to get a height where this has to go, or just kind of eyeballing it, trying to figure out what to do. But first thing I got to do is relocate that latch and see if it'll work just fine, a little bit off to one side. anyway, that's what I'm up to now. All right, so here's my highly scientific method of figuring out where to put this latch mechanism. First of all, I cut out that panel that has the, this is the mechanism for opening the tailgate, which I'm going to relocate to one side of this latch once I get it located. Anyway, I put the latching mechanism together with this keeper, and then I put this piece of plastic on the mounting plate in order just to hold everything square and even temporarily. And so that these are the two actual mounting holes. I've got it bolted to, so I can sight these up. This is the most important thing. If I just went by the center of where it catches over here, it's actually offset a little bit. So because this is the actual hole for the key, so I wanted to make sure that the key was dead center of the tailgate. So I measured off the tail light pods over here on either side, and to make sure that that's right in the center of the tailgate. So everything's clear. Wanted to make sure it wasn't in the license plate opening, which is a little, it's low, but the actual license plate is down in this area here, so that's not going to create any issues. So it's a first look, and I can see already that the tailgate, it can come closer to the tailgate by about 5/8 of an inch. That's roughly. So I'll proceed from here to kind of inch my way into locating this permanently. Now that I'll basically draw a level line across here, and then I'll measure up to these two points here, and that'll give me an idea where the center of these holes need to be, and then I could take the latching mechanism off of this, and I can just work with the mechanical part of the catch and the key mechanism and all that without having all of this jazz in the way. So that'll give me a locator for those two spots, and that puts me in the neighborhood of where I need to go. Now, before we go any further with this, I just wanted to acknowledge some good information that was given to me by one of my viewers. Commented on a Facebook post that I made with some progress on the car. A guy by the name of John Glasscock made a good suggestion about these shocks that I'd taken a look at really quickly early on, the idea of putting in coilovers in order to allow me to adjust the ride height of this car, because it was either a choice between the springs that are in it and possibly not having the rake that I want, or getting some lowering springs, in which case I couldn't really control the height other than what those springs would give me. So the idea came to me about the use of the coilovers, but I kind of dismissed it and forgot about it. It didn't seem to be anything that I had to get on really quickly, but I ran into this problem where this stock shock, mounts through the deck here, and I didn't like the idea that this much of the shock and the stud was going to stick up into the bed, and I was going to have to come up with some artificial way to make it appear like that was purposeful, coming through there like that, and that was not going to be easy. A couple of good suggestions. One suggestion was to put a stabilizer bar across from location to location to make it look like it was intentional there, but also to add some strength to the shock mounting point, which was not a bad idea. I thought that was pretty good, as it would end up giving me a little height here that I could just use as a guide to put any loads in across this height that I talked about earlier, about having a 48-inch panel or anything like that and riding up over top of these wheel tubs. At any rate, the coilovers, turns out, as John was so good to point out with some photographs, they mount in such a way that they replace the coil spring, the coil springs in the rear. They mount around the knob, that the spot that the coil springs actually go to. So they don't come through here. They mount to a bracket that basically goes in. It's like a hoop, and then on the end of the hoop is the mounting point for the shock absorber, and that's pretty much it. So I think I'm going to look at that seriously as a way around this issue of these stock shocks coming through here. It's probably about $1,600 for a set with all the brackets and everything for the front and the rear, but it may turn out to be the way to go with all of this stuff. The other guy I'd like to give a shout out to is John McKinney, who gave me some clues as to how to determine whether or not this rear end was, actually a Z-28 or V8 specific rear end. One of the clues is whether or not it's posi traction, just to spin it forwards, and you can see the opposite end. Well, you can't see it really, but it's actually rotating in the same direction, so that tells me that it's a positive traction or limited slip differential. And so the other thing would be how tall the gears are in the rear end, which I intend to have the rear end gone through by a friend of mine. So at that time he gave me some numbers that I could read off of I believe the ring gear, and there's a number on there that tells me the gear ratio and whether or not this is suitable. And the initial conclusion here is that it being a posi rear, that it probably wasn't from a 6-cylinder car. So that's a high level of confidence that's probably from the Z-28. So again, thanks to John and John for giving me some information. I'm not a mechanic. I never claimed to be. I'm a fabricator, sheet metal fabricator. I put the decorations on the cars. I don't make them go fast or anything like that. So I'm kind of at the mercy of the limits of my knowledge on that area, and I appreciate the input. I might not take every suggestion, but I do appreciate getting them because they widen my perspective, as they say. So thanks again. Okay, apologize for not filming more of this process, but it was kind of like I was in the zone because there's so many shapes that I had to concentrate on, matching up, and also not lose track of the overall shape of this piece, which I did at one point. I had to cut some of it back apart, but basically what I ended up doing was first cutting this piece out of the center and trying to leave it as tacked as possible, all the perimeter. And then I went ahead, once this was cut out, which was a cutout about this big right here, I went ahead and then figured out where this plate had to go to receive this latch mechanism, which is going to fit in here, and then there'll be a cover over it. Anyway, so I put this plate in, developed this plate up first. Then once I had this plate, I brought this piece in as close as I could, bring it as close back to center as I could for this latch mechanism here. In the process, of course, this is not going into a nice uniform area like this. Is very symmetrical in here, and there was it was pretty intense to try and get all this to settle down at like I said, one point I had some really crooked stuff going on here, and I cut it all back apart. I put the skin on, screwed it on just to get everything righted back once everything was cut loose, so that I could reestablish it, in the arc of the tailgate here. And so, like I said, then I went ahead and patched this in here, around here, and then finally I filled in this last little piece here because this was way wider. It was like way out to here, so I figured, well, let me just fill that in over there. And so anyway, like I said, apologize for not taking you through that all, but I was having a hard time riding through it myself, so I'll show you from here on out. All right, so I put the handle back on. I've got the latch on over here. I've been working on getting the bolt-up locations here for this, so I don't have the skin on yet, but this is where we're at with that. You can see I put some weld nuts over here. I still have to make a large clearance hole for the barrel of the lock. It's going to go on the tailgate. But here I took the rods that came with the car, and this one I cut short, and this one here I added a piece to lengthen it so that it takes up for the offset, but everything seems to work okay. So I was worried that the offset might have caused some issues with the leverage and that it wouldn't open. The other thing I did was this thing has some crazy little white metal clips that fit in these tiny little grooves that no longer exist to hold it from popping out of this fixture here. So what I did was I drilled out these holes here to fit these more modern, at least plastic clips that they use on all modern latches now, basically. So it aligns it with the hole. It also creates a little nice little lubricated joint. And then this piece here, I can't do it with one hand, but it pops up. And then once it pops up and rotates out of the way, you can just slip this rod right out. So got that set up on here to help secure these rods. Anyway, I've got to keep in mind I've got to put holes for the electric wires that are going to come off of this thing. That got to be fed eventually down into here and then into the bottom of the car through a little bit of a chase. Anyway, this area over here is open for a reason. There's a plastic sitting right under all this nonsense, a plastic housing here for the license plate that you can take out, but you can take that thing out and then you can reach in all around to access all of this stuff through the license plate hole. So anyway, I've got to be careful I don't weld something on someplace that I need to get to later. So I got to keep my wits about me. Not an easy task. All right, I hope I got you at a good angle here on this tripod here so I can show you what's going on. First thing I did was I've got this piece of sheet metal bent at a 90 and shrunk and stretched to represent how the skin looks relative to the inner liner. Clamped up here, clamped down there. I've got the center of it kind of eyeballed in here. I've also gone ahead and I've cut a large clearance hole here, 2 hole saws, and then I flattened out the intermediate part here to create this oval shape. This is the lock barrel that came out of the Camaro, and you can see that it has a pretty deep throat on it. It's not like something you would find where the older cars or some cars have a little clip real close to the face here that clips it right to the sheet metal. This doesn't have this; just loads through the back of a tail panel in the Camaro, and it mounts from the back side here. So as you can see here, it's actually on an angle, which is nice because that helps match the angle of the tailgate skin here. So basically I have to set this in probably just shy of flush here, just a little bit proud of the surface of where the sheet metal is going to end up for the outer skin. And I've got to feed it into the lock mechanism, which I'll mount later. And then I've got to come up with a mount that basically a bracket that comes around here and goes back to the inner part of the tailgate. And that way I can come in from the inside to load this barrel. If I ever have to change it out, I could just fish it back through, take the lock mechanism off, and then take this barrel and bring it through this side here. This will first go in first, get secured, and then the catch itself will slide over this centerpiece here that actuates it. And hopefully it'll just stick nicely through the skin, and then everything will be just peachy. So we'll see how that goes, and I'll show you how that's all working out as I go along. Okay, so here's how I have the lock barrel mocked up going into the latch mechanism. Basically, I've got this profile here that represents where the skin is and how far it is off this flange and that flange. Then I had just cut out a piece of sheet metal with the proper diameter hole in it, and so I could move it up and down with this clamp here to see where the best location was for it to rotate, and right here is the best spot. And now I got to reverse engineer a bracket that this will bolt to that'll space it off the inside just enough for this to become just a little proud of the surface of the skin. So that's got to be a piece taken from here out to here, down, across, taken in the angle of this lock barrel, and then I have to weld some nuts to it so you could come from the inside here through this hole and bolt it up, and then slide this mechanism on. You can see how much further away this mechanism was on the Camaro. It was way in here. But so let's just slid through, and I'll cut this off to the proper length when everything is done. But yeah, it's a chicken and an egg situation here. You know, you've got to remember what's got to happen in the long run if you need to service this stuff. So that's where I'm at now. The problem I'm running into now is how would I ever service this rod if it ever snapped? Will I be able to take? It's going to go between this area. How will I have to design this bracket so that I could take this out? If I put this around, the easiest way would be to come out and come down and go back in. But that's going to kind of trap the rod possibly from side to side from ever being fished out of the hole where it can come out through this license plate hole. But it might be just a sacrifice piece, who knows? But we'll see what I can do about that. Anyway, moving on. Okay, so this is the next step in developing this lock barrel mount. As you can see, it's I've made this plate, and it's got some welded nuts on this side, which is the side facing out to the exterior of the car. As you can see, the lock barrel still would be sticking out pretty far if I just bumped it in there against the skin right here. So what I've got here is another plate that is going to stand off like this, and that leaves me with a less of a prominence right there. And just so I've got this little mock-up because there's a slight curvature at that juncture. This would go on and represent the skin, and so now the whole build-up looks reasonable to finish out to the outside of the tailgate. So now the job becomes, I've got to weld this piece to this piece, and now that I've got these lock nuts welded in, and then I'll have to position this in place to put some standoffs to hold it into position, and we'll go on from there. I'll show you that when I get going on it. All right, lots of moving parts here as I attempt to get this whole thing pulled together. I spray painted some weld-through primer on the back side of this plate before I welded it to this plate. As you can see, I sprayed it on this side, so both of those sides are protected. Anyway, so this is one assembly now. This represents the skin. Hopefully it's accurate. This represents the skin thickness, and so I've just temporarily tacked this right to this representation of the skin. And then I aligned it to where this key turns the mechanism freely. It's not bound up in any way. I also rejiggered this rod, which I thought might get in the way. Originally I had this thing, you can see my old marks. I had this down here, which wasn't a problem. But as I finally attached it to this profile, it was at the wrong angle, so I had to bring it up, which is not a bad thing. It puts it higher in the panel, which looks better. And so now I've got it suspended here, and I will just take some 1/4-inch tubing, and I will basically tent off of here. I'll come from here to this corner, from there to that corner. Then I will make sure that it's parallel to this surface before I do the same thing from this corner over to this corner, and then down over here. I've pre-drilled this hole already for a grommet, rubber grommet, to feed the wiring through into the tailgate, and then eventually down through here, and then through a rubber grommet here, and into like a little rubber wire chase down into the tail panel. One thing I did come across while looking up some pictures, which is a little bit upsetting to me, and I didn't notice before, was this is a nice straight line going across the bottom of the tailgate here. I saw a picture of an El Camino with a roll pan on it. Now, like I said, my first El Camino, I made my own tailgate and roll pan. Just basically had a simple frame, aluminum tubing, and then I had some anodized aluminum that I just rolled over and attached to that panel, and then it was held in with just some like hood pins on the back. Well, that panel was obviously straight across, so that when I made my roll pan, I was able to just make a straight roll pan that went straight across also. Very, very simple deal. Now this has shape coming in this direction here, as you can see. It rolls from here, becomes broad, and then goes back in. Well, that's all fine and good, and it makes the roll pan a little more difficult to make because you have to shape it now because it rolls under, but it also rolls out, so that means it's going to be a big English wheel job to get that thing to be compliant. Problem is that the gap between the tailgate and the roll pan itself has to be pretty large, probably about 1/2 of an inch, which I'm not too happy with. But when you've got this roll here like this, and you take and you pull the tailgate down, unlike a truck, most trucks are straight across. They don't have, it doesn't come out in a bulge like that. So what happens is, as you roll it down, and it's in the horizontal position, you have a profile that looks like this, which means that the tightest spot between the roll pan and here is going to be right here. So maybe it'll be 1/8 of an inch here when it's open, and then when you close it back up, in order for this to be 1/8 of an inch, it's going to be probably when it's open. When it's closed, it'll be probably about 1/2 of an inch all the way across. Not a lot can be done about that, but anyway, that's what I'm dealing with there. So I'll continue on with this lock mechanism and see how that goes. Okay, that's everything kind of spotted into place. I just popped the latch in here to see where it was going to end up relative to my framing. Is going to be 1 inch on the perimeter of this tonneau cover, and I'm going to want it to come up pretty much flush with this this trim piece right here. This trim piece is actually going to be part of the tonneau cover. So I've got the latch in right now. It's not exactly held fast right there. It's just kind of pivoting on the latch point, and I might have to tilt it away here, which means I'll make some angled shims for it. At any rate, that's where the latch goes, and that's the release. So basically, hopefully that all works just like that, and we'll be good to go as far as opening up this tonneau cover with a key latch. Well, a little sidetrack here. Part of my ceiling collapsed over here because of a water leak that I failed to see in time. And so I'm jerking around with the ceiling of the shop right now. I had to build myself a ladder yesterday because I don't have a ladder tall enough to reach this ceiling. I did this ceiling when I had a rolling platform that I built, rolling scaffold, which I had, of course, dismantled. It was only temporary while I put the ceiling up. I always wondered what I was going to do if I had to do some maintenance on the ceiling, and well, I just figured it out. Anyway, let me show you what's going on with the car. I got this the interior of this panel seam sealed down here. I've got it primered up and ready to put the other skin on, hopefully. I've got that also primed around the perimeter and cleaned up a little bit. So it's time to proceed with putting these two halves together and see how everything works together. Anyway, that's where I'm at. There's all the insulation come out of the ceiling. Anyway, good times. All right, I never did show you that I finished up this corner over here. So, neither one of them is 100% perfect, but that's what they made Bondo for. I went ahead and took the tailgate off and hemmed everything over. So this is all hemmed over right here. And on the bottom, along the bottom side, went ahead and welded up these drilled out spot welds. And I just set the key barrel in here. You can see that right there. This handle over here, offset, is working just fine. You can see my access hole here, so I was able to drop everything in and put those two nuts in. And then I'll take this this latch and just run this latch right over top here, get it in the slot, and then go ahead and I'll bolt that up in that location right there. And yeah, so that's where I'm at with that. You can see how everything's hemmed over, and then I went ahead and primed everything just to keep the flash rust off of it. So moving along. All right, with the tailgate back on and positioned where it's going to eventually land, I decided to start making this roll pan. I was going to make it a solid roll pan, but then I realized that if you make it solid, you can't access these bolts for the hinge. So I've got to make it removable, which complicates things, as you would think. So the first thing I do is match this profile, 3/4 by 1/2, and then I drilled through a couple of holes that I'll be able to access from the bottom inside to run some bolts through, some weld nuts that I'm going to put in to this this corner piece. Also, in the process of looking it over, I noticed that this turns a little too hard, so I'm setting it up so that my roll pan starts proud of the corner so that I can make the correction with some Bondo to get this, and then the roll pan will extend off at the proper angle, and it won't have a butt cheek here. In other words, if I started this inboard right here flush with this would come in and then go back out because of the way this thing curves. You can see that right there. At any rate, a little course correction there. Keep an eye on it. That way, if I just push this flush and I decided to build everything out with Bondo, I would have Bondo from here all the way into the center of the roll pan. So hopefully this will keep the Bondo to a minimum just in the corner piece itself, which I anticipated having to do because nothing's ever perfect. Once you start putting paint on it and stuff, you could start to see little flat spots and stuff. Anyway, that's where I'm at with that. I got to build the perimeter first, like I do with all my panels, which would be 2 profiles on either side and then a profile over here to define the top edge of the roll pan, and then one at the bottom going across to establish the bottom, and then the wonderful process of wheeling this long piece here and try to make it out of one piece and get it all to flow together. We'll see how that goes. All right, so I had this perimeter piece welded up there with a couple of tacks. Then I went ahead and I drilled some pilot holes, 1/8" pilot holes first, and then clearance holes for a 1/4 bolt through both the flange and through this inner corner here. Now, if I had thought ahead, I would have put some, weld nuts on the back side, on the inside, but I don't have that opportunity now. So what I've got to do is I've got to be very careful and take a step bit and keep drilling this hole out until you see this is a flange nut here. So what I'll do is, you can see it's got like a little countersink there. I'll sink this down till it's just about flush. Doesn't need to be flush here because I'm going to have a spacer here of about 3/16 of an inch, so that it's got a a body line going right down here that's spaced out a little bit, so it doesn't look like it's supposed to be right up against here. So having this a little bit proud of the surface is not going to be too bad, but I'll put it on this long bolt here in order to hold it in place while I just tack it into position. Once I get these holes enlarged enough to where just the nut itself, the hex part, will slip through, but not the flange itself. Now I'll show you that when it's done. All right, so this is what it looks like with this piece bolted up with a spacer in between. You can see that I got to correct for this with some Bondo on this piece here, but this spacer will act as kind of a guide to get us to the right shape. At any rate, it's spaced off now about 3/16 of an inch, and I'll proceed to do the other side. I'll hold it steady here so you can see what's going on for a second. I just thought I'd show you what these nuts look like when they're embedded. You can see they're a little bit, I've ground it off, but it's a little proud at the surface now. because of where it's at, it's not critical. But if I had some situation like this where I needed them to be flush with the surface, I would take once I got the hole clear of what the hex nut would go through, I would take a countersink, a large countersink, and slowly go through and widen the hole with the countersink in order to have a bevel surface, so it just came down flush with the surface. And being with the countersink, it's less of a danger of going through the sheet metal altogether, making the hole too big to put the nut in the first place. But anyway, that's a way around if you forget to put the lock nut on the back side, or you change your mind like I did right here and decide that you need one. It's a way to get around putting one in the surface. Okay, so I've completed the perimeter framing for this roll pan that gives me a solid structure that I can unbolt and put on the bench and then skin. But one of the main things I had to do here was determine the distance from the existing tailgate, what kind of a gap I needed. And the way I did that was I basically measured from here to the floor in the center, dropped the tailgate, measured again from this point to the floor, which at that point it was curved in this direction, in a downward direction, and I got the difference, which was about 5/16. So I've got a 3/8 inch gap here. Hopefully that'll be enough. What I did was I bent a piece of 14 gauge into an L shape, and then I kind of just put it up behind there, spaced it down 3/8 of an inch, and just tacked it into place, and that gave me a spot to where I could establish this rim here, which is another L-shaped piece, which is 3/4 of an inch by a half, and I shaped it to match the curvature of the tailgate, and then tacked it into place and connected it with my two profiles on the end that connect to my corners on either side. I then made another corresponding piece that matched the curve in this direction, and welded it from one end to the other. Then I cut and shrunk and stretched these profiles, which are 1/4 of an inch by 3/4 of an inch, and that's to not make too much of a prominence or a facet right here where the sheet metal will go across it. And I put one in the center and two splitting those two spaces evenly, and in order to stabilize so that these corners didn't rotate in. Once I unbolted it, I put this 1/4 inch DOM tubing spaced out 5 inches down, which is about half of this is a 10-inch roll here. So I put that mid span all the way across over here, and bent these to match this profile here so that they kind of sweep around in this direction. Now that I've got that established, I can come back in here and just hopefully just unbolt it. It'll hold the shape. I could set it up on the bench and hopefully work a little bit more leisurely than it would be to try and crawl under here and keep fitting this, which would be a real pain and ultimately not a very good job. So I'll cut that loose where these tacks are right here, and then I'll bolt it and then proceed with that long process of shaping this pan to go across it. Yes, it's got to go in this direction, it's got to have a swoop in this direction, and so basically it's got to do a number of things which will require it to be mostly shaping it with the English wheel, but at any rate, I'm going to get on with it. All right, after about 3 hours of beating and banging and English wheeling and some more beating and banging, using this mallet to create prominences, using the power hammer over there to get some higher crowns in different areas, using the English wheel, try and smooth everything out. I've got this just screwed to this frame right now, and let me just turn it over here. The upside down. Let's lift it around. Anyway, that's what it's looking like right now. So you can see that it's got a curve across the top, like that. So it curves in a couple of different directions here, so a bit of a pain to make. Nothing's ever 100% perfect. I mean, unless I'm going to spend a week on it, but my back is killing me, my arms are killing me, which is nothing, because that'll all happen if I try to open up a bottle of orange juice. But anyways, that's where I'm at with that. Now, I'll fit it back to the car, see if there's anything obvious that's out of shape, which could be, because a lot of tension in this panel. Even though I try to get it as perfectly form fit as I could possibly get it, there's always just a little bit of tension in it, and it might be pulling the frame out of shape a little bit. And we'll see if that all looks good. And if it does, then I'll have to paint the frame, some weld through primer, drill out some holes for some plug welds, and yeah, let's see how it all goes together. All right, so I got it tossed in there, and I could see I've got a few issues that I got to deal with. This is fine right here. That's almost a half an inch right here. Now this is 3/8 is what I set it at. It's too close. Bottom line is when this rotates down, you know, it hits right along this area right here, which is going to be a big problem. So I've got to drop that down, open that up just a little bit, like it is on the ends. You can see it closes up here, and then it opens back up on the edge, closes up, opens up over here. So I've got to adjust that down, get that rim down, and then try it back on the car. See how all that goes before I start welding pieces back together. Anyway, that's where I'm at. Well, a little bit of a disappointment. I was looking into the coilover brackets that was suggested to me in order to eliminate the way these shocks mount straight up through the bed here, and they would, from this point up, about 2 inches would be above here, the rubber grommet, and then this washer, and then the stud and the bolt, or the nut on the bolt, would be sticking up about 2 inches. So a number of suggestions were made to me about how I could eliminate that. One of them being that I could get these the coilovers and basically get rid of my coil springs, and then this bracket goes in the same location that the coil spring top would mount to. Up there's like a knob sticking down, and this would position itself over top of that, and then on the bottom side here is the mount for the actual shock absorber, the coilover. But this is the top side of that mount, and I zoomed in, which you can't really see here because it's just a printed picture, but you can see here there's a stud sticking up quite a bit, and basically that is meant to come through the hole on the F body that this normally goes through. So I haven't eliminated the thing that I'm trying to eliminate, which is this stud sticking through into the bed of the El Camino. So I had thought that this would just be a situation where this whole thing would just mount up onto there some other way. I didn't know what I was thinking, but I just decided to take a look at the brackets themselves and see how they all worked. And you can see that the shock absorber itself is mounted below the bed, which is nice, except for the fact that in order to stabilize it, it has to through bolt through the bed, which kind of puts me back in the same spot I am. Probably a little bit better looking. It's because it's just a stud and a nut instead of a big rubber grommet and a washer and a nut and a stud. So I have to cook on that one for a little while longer, see how I want to deal with that. But I've been wrestling with this roll pan, so I can't get far enough back to show you what it looks like here, basically. So it's all welded up. I had drilled holes along the perimeter and plug welded it all the way along to the frame that was beneath there. And then I welded up this whole top edge and ground it off. So I have to, it's got a little bit of wiggle here. It's a little bit, wiggly. So I got to put a tie back, to the structure back there to hold that stable. But other than that, now comes the decision I have to make as to whether I want my exhaust tips to, have a little cutout here, or just drop them, make it easy on myself and just drop the exhaust tips below the roll pan. The other thing I want to do is put a tow hitch on this vehicle, and I'm not so sure that I want the big tow hitch receiver just sticking down below there. So I'll have to think about that a little bit. I may have to figure out a way to make it detachable, because it'll be few and far between when I need to tow anything with this vehicle. So I might have to create something that bolts to the substructure that you could put on, rather than have that thing just sticking out there all the time. But anyway, like I said, I have done it in the past. Did it with my car, and just did it with Randy's car, and cut into the to the back of the roll pan. In case of Randy's car, I just cut into the bottom of the bumper, and made it half the dimension of the exhaust tips, and they look pretty good. And I've got that on my car too, and I like it. But not sure I really need to do that here, but something I'm going to kick around, and we'll see how it goes. At any rate, that's it for now, and another long rambling speech going nowhere. And I appreciate everybody who's following along with the project, and I will see you on the next one.